Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Swain's fourth ever virtual discussion series, Let's Talk, with today's topic revolving around diversity, inclusion, and our work in protecting those students and community members who identify as LGBTQIA. My name is Veronica Boshin. I've been a faculty member at Swain for the past 6 years, and I'm honored to be moderating today's talk. Today, we're braving this conversation, as always, with honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to embrace the discomfort that will inevitably arrive throughout our dialogue. We ask everyone joining to bring an open heart and mind throughout our program, as our only mission is to continue Swain's inclusive culture for our students and to bring action awareness as we dismantle bias and prejudice through our own teaching, discussions, and examples. We would like to remind you that today's meeting is being recorded and will be posted to our website, swain.org. This is a closed webinar and you have been muted by the host. No one can see you or hear you, so you do not have to worry about interrupting the program. While there is the option to use the chat feature, we ask that you allocate any questions you have for our discussion by using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you feel more comfortable asking questions anonymously, the Q&A box allows you to do so. So first up on today's agenda, we would like to introduce Justice Davis. Justice is a queer spoken word poet and young professional from Kansas City, Missouri. In May 2016, she received her business marketing and communications degree from Kansas State University. During her time at K-State, she served as the president of the award-winning Black Student Union, co-founded Conversation Cafe on Race and Inclusion in partnership with Leadership Studies, and was named the chair of the Big 12 Council on Black Student Government, an organization that governs all Black student councils at Big 12 universities. During her time in Easton, PA, Justice founded Soul Sessions Lehigh Valley, a monthly performance series for young local talent. In November 2018, with the goal of bringing artists of all backgrounds together to uplift the community, primarily underrepresented communities. In 2019, Justice was placed on the Inclusion and Diversity Coalition for Hormel Foods to help drive the company's strategic D&I strategies. In this role, she facilitates training sessions for team members with the focus of leveling the playing field for marginalized groups and creating inclusive spaces. Today, Justice lives in Long Beach, California as a brand manager for Hormel Foods, managing the Holy Guacamole and Avocado brand. Balancing both her professional and creative work, she continues to facilitate creative and leadership development workshops for schools, universities, and various community organizations. Her poetry has been featured at a host of community events, corporate spaces, and organizations all over the country. As always, after we hear from our guest expert, Dr. Armistead Webster will speak on behalf of Swain. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Justice. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Veronica.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that was a really great introduction. It makes me sound way cooler than I am. I have a very lengthy bio, but I appreciate you for introducing me to the community here. But I'm excited to talk about ways that we can protect our LGBTQ plus youth. I do want to preface this conversation. I am in the backyard of a house right now. I'm on set for a production shoot right now, so hopefully you'll see a campaign and see my face and hear some poetry as well. But please excuse the background, and if you hear some background noise of outdoors, that's what it is. So I'm excited to be talking, and so let's go ahead and get it started. So I already got introduced, and you'll learn more about me as I continue with this talk today. And hopefully we can continue a productive dialogue around ways to protect our youth. So let's keep going with this slide. Awesome. So I do want to manage expectations before I talk, and keep in mind that we're going to open up Q&A at the end of this. I'm not sure if the comment box is still a function that we can use, but if you do have a question on a slide, hopefully you all can comment and let us know, and Veronica can let me know if there's a comment of a question that comes up. But the expectations, the first one is, I want to say that you may not agree with everything I say, and that's okay. I think that's a beauty of diversity and inclusion, is that everyone is different, everyone thinks differently, and it takes a whole different perspectives and et cetera to kind of really make things move and shake. So that's okay, and we'll learn and grow together And hopefully my goal is to have you all walk away with an aha moment. It's not a big group, it's an intimate setting. So, I want you all to really think about aha moments as I talk about my experiences. So from ground rules, this is a judgment-free zone. Ask questions, engage towards the end, or if you feel moved to leave a comment of a question. And then let's operate with grace. And I'll talk more about what that means and why I live by that mantra of operating with grace as we continue with the conversation today. So I want to talk about the things that I would discuss. So the first thing is I want to talk about what we need. I say we as in the LGBTQ plus community, but specifically our youth. What do we receive and what's the impact of that, right? So we have to set the tone and the foundation of why it's so important to have discussions like these. Then I'll go into something called transformation. And that's just leveraging my story into hopefully we can all grow together just using my story and leveraging my own experience. And then answering the question of where do we go from here? So we're not just talking about these things. We want to take action after these and create safe spaces for our youth, especially in their pivotal times, such as elementary, middle school, and high school. Those are such pivotal years that help shape our experiences. And so we need to ask the question, where do we go from here after we leave this discussion today? Okay, so I want to do some. I was a sociology major at first at K-State before I went into business. I was a pre-law, English, and sociology, and so that changed a couple of times in college. But one thing I learned was the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and he was a psychologist, a famous psychologist, and a lot of the principles that are taught within psychology is based off of his study. But he talks about the basic needs for any human being, right? So we have physiological needs. Obviously the air, water, food, etc. We have safety needs. And I think this is, as we go up the ladder here, this speaks volumes to the community, right? Safety needs, personal security, employment, resources, health, property. All of these things you will find, if you look at the statistics, have disparities when it comes to marginalized groups, specifically LGBTQ plus communities. So, but it's one of our basic parts of what we need to live as humans. As you move up, you see love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, sense of community. It's so important, right? And so when we think about the community and how it can oftentimes be ostracized or the community itself is a controversial topic. One of the key or the core things of pride is the idea of being loved and feeling like you belong to a space. So that's why I wanted to highlight that. So then it keeps going up: esteem, self-respect, status, recognition. We all desire that type of affirmation in life. And then the top is self-actualization, the desire to become the most that one can be. And the reason why it's a ladder is like the idea that you can't move to the next step without going to the core of the needs at first. So this is why it's important. And then I move to the right, and this is more of the business person of me, the partners in leadership. And it talks about how do we get results? How do we get the action that we want to have within people? And the base of that is creating experiences. Experiences then will lead to beliefs. Beliefs lead into action, and then action leads into result. So to marry that, to parallel that with our LGBTQ plus youth, is we have to create experiences, one that speaks to those left-hand side needs, right? And then that creates new beliefs in how they view themselves within the world, beliefs in how they view the community around them. That turns into more productive action and more productive results. So that's what we need. But let's go to the next slide and see what do we actually receive. So these are just quick statistics, right? And I found these online to source. They do a lot of research in the LGBTQ plus youth demographic more specifically. But you can see here that almost all of 98% is basically all of LGBTQ plus students heard gay used in a negative way, right? 92% reported that they felt distressed because of this language. And then you go on the right-hand side, 70% of LGBTQ plus students reported being verbally harassed based on their sexual orientation, right? Verbal harassment. All right, and this is youth. These are our babies, our kids. 30% almost reported being physically harassed based on their sexual orientation. So a huge chunk of that is being physically abused. My stepbrother, he was jumped for his orientation in high school. So that hits home for me. 1 in 5 students were physically assaulted. And then the list goes on. So obviously we don't receive a lot of those basic hierarchy of needs, right? And then so what's the impact of that? You can go to the next slide here. And this is why it's so important to watch the language that we use with our youth. And I'll get more into that when I talk about my own story. But to paint the picture, lesbian, gay, and bisexual children are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide at some point in their lives. And suicide rates, we know that it went up since COVID. We know that in high school, bullying a lot of times lead to suicide attempts, but to the idea that children in this community are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide, 8 times more likely to attempt suicide than those whose families accept them. So lesbian, gay, and bisexual young people who come from families that reject or do not accept them are 8 times more likely to attempt suicide than those who have a family that accepts them. So this is why your acceptance and that protection of these children is so important. 41% of transgender adults said they had attempted suicide, and 61% of transgender people who are victims of physical assault had attempted suicide. So that goes into the trans community. But a lot of times, and on the right side, our children feel unsafe in school. Half of them are prevented from using their name or their preferred name or pronoun. 70% of them experience verbal harassment a lot of times in school. This is the impact, right? We want to save our children. Let's keep it going here. Sorry for the play in the background. Can y'all still hear me okay, Veronica?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So the goal to paint that tone, or that picture, is saying that we need you. So this is a map, and this is the most updated map that they use to measure LGBTQ plus equality by state. So it's counted by a policy that mentions orientation or gender in the form of protecting those groups. So the more green, the more protection. The more red, obviously, it's not as protected. You can see primarily in the South. You get a little bit of the Midwest in there. The coasts do a really good job, but there's a lot of room. So we need you. We're not protected by state, by law, in a lot of places. So this is why families, schools, that type of community is super important into protecting our youth. Can you go to hit it one more time? I think it's another map. Oh, can you go back? So I think it was some graphics in there. So I think the first map showed just things that overcompasses as a whole community, but this one's more specific to gender policy. So our trans community, and it's way more red on this map than it is for the entire community as a whole. So that's just something to keep in mind, that our trans youth also are just extremely unsafe compared to the entire community. So I wanted to call that out as well. Thanks, Veronica. So let's talk about grace and compassion, and I'm going to use my story, the foundation. So, Young Justice, I grew up in church. I grew up in a very, very Christian family. So that's still how I operate today within my Christian faith. But we know that traditionally, being gay is not welcome. So as a young child, I was felt with the nuance, and it really wasn't so I was coming out. I just remember during this time. But so this picture, I'm not sure how old I was, but I remember thinking to myself of a feeling of liking women or girls at the time, at the age of I was in fourth grade, more so fourth grade. But I went to a Christian private school, right? I was in church all the time. I loved God. I still love God. But back then I was going to church religiously. I'm talking multiple times a week. That was a part of my everyday life. That was part of my life. That was where I felt the most activated. And then to not that was church on the weekends and in the evening, but I was also in a Christian school. And so there was things that I knew of and I heard of at the time, because our school, the school that I went to, was elementary all the way up to high school. And so you would hear things that, if you came out, or if they knew that you were gay, you'd be kicked out. And then I heard the rhetoric in church that if those of you who grew up in a faith-based community, you heard the same rhetoric, right? And so it had me literally hating that fact that I felt those things. So I tried to pray it away as a kid. I remember crying, like, God, I'm just gonna like a boy. Maybe I like a boy so much that I will forget about these gay thoughts, right? So this is again these are type of experiences. So even if you're not sure if you're an ally or you're teaching your students to be allies, or you're not sure if your child, it may be part of the community. This is why language matters in protecting our youth, because you don't know what they're wrestling with inside. And so when you talk and speak language that's harmful, saying things like, oh, being gay isn't right, and all these things, it is detrimental into someone's self-esteem, especially in the ages where we're being molded, influenced by the world around us. And so Young Justice was not out. Young Justice was very, very scared to come out, and Young Justice didn't do that at all under the age of 18. I was still under the mold of, okay, my family doesn't like it, God doesn't like it, I don't need to act on it, I need to like guys. And so I kind of forced myself into dating, or I just didn't date date at all comparatively to my friends. And so I think the first time I told someone that I actually liked a woman was in sophomore year of high school. And I was so scared and so nervous of what that looked like and the trajectory of my high school career and status during that time. So this is why, again, I go back to that pyramid, the results pyramid, on the right hand side that said create experiences, because experiences create belief. So now I'm believing that what I'm doing is wrong. My very being is wrong, and that impact on me. Then I got into college, right? I got into college, and again, I'm gonna set the tone here. My family did not know. So maybe, after I came out, a couple of my aunts or my cousins said they questioned it because I was a tomboy growing up, played basketball, but I started being more girly as I got older, because I'm like, okay, this is becoming more serious. Everyone's dating, so I needed to look the part. All right. And just to set the tone, my pronouns are she, her, hers. I do want to say that. And I'm also I still identify as my cisgender, as a woman, but I am masculine presenting, which is basically a fancy way of saying I dress in men's clothing. But back then I was super girly because I had to keep the part of, and this is, again, not just something I haven't came out yet. It was, again, just the idea of what could happen and hearing the language. So then I got to college and I started getting into myself, right? So again, I'm still keeping the narrative of I got to be as girly as I can. I got to just try to like a guy, but still learning more about marginalized groups and those experiences. And college is that space where you learn more, you gain perspective, and you grow. And so, I was really coming to myself as an activist and really embracing my race of being Black, but then kind of push this whole gay thing under the rug, I guess unintentionally, if you will. So I felt like I was forced to choose an identity, right? So it was easier to say, okay, I'm Black, I'm okay with it. Let me talk about uplifting communities from a race perspective, right? But I was literally marginalizing my own identity and not embracing who I am. So I guess how I got over that, it wasn't, my coming out story. I do have privilege, and it wasn't this dramatic story of, I do have a loving family, but it was more so coming out to myself and being okay with myself and who I am, given my faith, right? And given those experiences. So when I say the peak, this middle picture is when I fully came out. I was actually, when I fully came out, it was senior year of high school. I started dating more women and really coming to myself, and I just didn't want to hide, right? Because your confidence lacks when you're worried about hiding a part of you. And I had done so much on campus. I mean, you heard in the bio, I did so much, and I was like, you know what? I didn't want something to mess up my brand, but the idea that your identity, your sexuality can mess up your idea, again, is that your brand is that experience that we need to kind of counteract. We got to create new experiences for people, even if we're not sure, right? Even if we're not sure. So this comes into protecting our spaces with the language we use. But really, it was the idea that I needed to live for myself. I've accomplished all these things just as you can. You can do this. So when I did it, it was very difficult conversations with my family, who were faith-based. And more specifically, I love my grandmother, but my grandmother was a big one because she was a woman of God. She's my best friend still to this day. So we have a great relationship, but it was hard for her to kind of accept the fact that her granddaughter, her baby, is a part of the community and what that looks like. And so this is why I want to get into grace and compassion, right? Because a lot of times when you hear harmful language, it's kind of rooted in this idea that being gay is some type of moral deficit, right? Is morally not right. And so I'm not sure, this is not a faith conversation. Whatever your faith is, that's okay. But what I want to push here is we can coexist, right? And so when I talk about operating in grace, I had to learn how to operate in grace for my family and understanding their undertone of where they were rooted from, where they grew up, and how their experience created their beliefs that led to actions, right? And then results, right? And so then if I'm operating in grace and I'm understanding this and I'm teaching this, I had to really take that in consideration. So I want to encourage you to operate in grace with the space around you. Operate with the idea that people, we are shaped by our experiences. We are shaped by how we're taught, our environment, and that's okay. But there is room to grow. And in that growing stage, give people the benefit of the doubt and give that grace and compassion and understanding so we can all have productive conversations, because we can't coexist, right? So this is something that I'm still battling with and struggling with, but also I'm taking it in stride and being more, I guess, embracive and engaging with in dialogue when it comes to even my faith and my sexuality. But the peak of who I am came after college, right? I started dating more. I started living in my truth. But really the struggle was coming out to myself, number one. Then also, how do I coexist in a community that may not agree with it? And so I want to stop there, because we hear this rhetoric all the time that I don't agree with you, but I love you, right? I don't agree with you, but these type of conversations. And so I really want us to be mindful. Sorry, I skipped ahead of myself. I want us to be mindful of the language, and how we can have more productive dialogue, and maybe let's take morality out of it and just start saying, hey, I see you, and I love you, and I support you, right? Let's leave everything else out and just say, hey, I support you, I love you, I see you, I'm here with you. That alone makes all the difference, right? So when we think about protecting our youth, you may not know the right things to say. You may not know the perfect thing to say, but you do know that loving is healthy. Affirming someone's identity is healthy, right? And creating that sense of belonging for that individual is healthy. So focus on that. The triumph is, here I am, right? I overcame my battle internally, my battle with faith, and difficult conversations with my family to kind of, and I'm still doing it. I'm not gonna, and Veronica may know this too, it's an ongoing process, but we're all in this together. But the thing is to remember how to operate in grace, and also have the lens of compassion, because that's what it's about, to see people who they are, to understand their experiences and their own process, and let them do that, and love and support them every step of the way. That's the biggest message that I push in conversations like this, because it means the world, especially, I cannot stress this enough, to our youth. We're dealing with a lot of things already when growing up. This part of their identity matters. It matters. And so just to hear that affirmation, love, and support, even if you don't have the right words to say, it makes all the difference. All right, we can go to the next one, because I think these points drive it home. And I already talked about this. So reaffirm your love, right? So let's talk. So the question is, where do we go from here, right? So reaffirm your love, right? Reaffirm your love for your child as an ally. Reaffirm that idea of, hey, I see you, and I support you, right? Encourage dialogue. I think the second piece is people struggle with, because it takes a lot to be vulnerable. It takes a lot when you don't know the right things to say. I give these talks all the time, whether it's a D&I conversation at my corporate job, when everything's so political and you got to be careful what you say. The thing is, we got to encourage dialogue and be comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So when it comes to our youth, get them to talk, get them to open up, create that safe space, and encourage dialogue with them, to check in. So if you do have a child that is a part of the community, has already came out, make sure you get them talking, because it doesn't just stop at home. When it comes to acceptance and belonging, right, it's a whole different ball game when you walk into a school, or when you walk into a community event or a camp. All right, and so make sure that they're okay. Learn the facts. I encourage everyone to learn the facts, right? And what the facts looks like, it kind of like, I gave you a glimpse of what that could look like as far as statistics, as far as, understanding policies and laws within your state. Just learn the science behind it. Learn what the psychologists are saying, what sociologists are saying about the community, right? So I think we can get over this, let's say, moral struggle or moral conflict by just learning more, understanding more, read, right? I encourage that, because it helps with people when it's more of a, okay, I'm scared for my child because it's out of the traditional norm, and I don't really know much, right? I encourage, this is when the learning part and the research part can intercede, and this is how we protect our youth, when we just learn about who they are and what they're going through. And there's so much research out there. They make it easy on us. It's all kind of, we have the internet, they make it easy on us. So I encourage everyone to learn the facts. The next piece is stay involved with school. We know bullying takes place a lot at school, and that's just, this is in any forms, right? For no matter how your child identifies, right? Stay involved with the school. Veronica and Dr. Webster here, be involved with the staff, and just to make sure your child is good, and ensure healthy relationships. A lot of times what I see with, and I'm just thinking about, I wasn't out in school, but my younger stepbrother, he was. And so one thing I learned is when they don't feel healthiness or healthy dialogue within the home, then they seek that out in other dynamics. So ensure that your child has healthy relationships. This is a part of protecting our youth, ensuring healthy relationships from both family, friends, and if they start dating. So this is an important call out that a lot of times I think is swept under the rug. stay attentive to social media. Social media is a blessing and a curse. I love to say it. It's given us so many, like the trends of the world is at our fingertips. Entrepreneurship, our kids are learning how to start their own businesses with social media, but at the same time, there's a lot of comparison and contrasting. Okay, my life is not like that. I want to be like this. Or cyberbullying is a really important thing too. So I would say pay attention to what's going on social media. I'm not saying watch and be a gatekeeper for your child, but I'm saying this is important, right? And so what happens online impacts someone. So when again, I go back to the hierarchy: experiences, beliefs, actions, results. All right. And then operate in grace. If I can say anything, and just in the conversation before we open it up for questions, is operate in grace. Have an understanding and a compassion for your child, and as an ally, right? And to operate with the grace lenses is so important, so important. And so I think at this time we can transition and open it up for questions, if that's okay.
Yeah. So actually, Justice, we're gonna let Armistead talk first, and then we're gonna open it up.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You always get me so fired up, though. Every time I hear you speak, I love everything you have to say.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Veronica.
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I think it's super important to learn from other people's stories, and for being brave enough to share yours. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
And before we open up the floor, we are going to hear from our head of school, Dr. Webster, speaking on behalf of Swain's leadership and action items as we move forward.
Thanks very much, Veronica, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to our final town hall of the 2021 school year. We held our first town hall on July 15th, 2020, almost a year ago, and it has been quite a year since then. Through the pandemic, in the merger, in the election, and the aftermath of that, we have continued to hold these events, thanks in large part to the energy and vision of Veronica. So I just want to give you that as we wrap up this school year, give you that shout out, and really appreciate you helping us stay on this path. Justice, I also want to thank you so much for being with us today. It is really great to have you here, and I appreciate you taking time out of your life and your schedule to be part of our town hall. And just listening to you talk, first of all, I'm going to use a phrase that we'll all start hearing more and more in the months ahead. Folks here at Moravian Academy Swain School, you talk both with your head and your heart. I love that you share data with us about the impact that the verbal and emotional and physical abuse has on LGBTQ youth. But you also clearly are talking from your heart as you tell your story and talk about others. So thank you for that. And another phrase, thank you for helping us with this courageous conversation that's so important for us to be having. I almost literally just finished attending the National Diversity Practitioners Institute. It ended at 6:30 this evening, 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So it ended about an hour ago. And I attended that institute along with Megan Franzition from Swain, our assistant head of school for teaching and learning, as well as Karen Washington, who's our director for community inclusion for the whole school, Dylan Deal, who's the director of the upper school Merle Smith campus, and Benita Griffin, who's the director of the downtown campus. And I was really glad to be there as part of a team from our school. At the opening session on Monday morning, we were asked to think not only about what we wanted to see happen at our schools, but why. And that really got me thinking about these town halls and other conversations we've had this year. Why did we choose to hold them? Why are we here this evening? And I have a couple of answers to that right now, and I know they're more than just a couple, but here are the ones that are at the front of my mind. So my first answer to that why is this. We say we are a welcoming and inclusive school and community, and I believe we truly mean that, and that to a great degree, we are that kind of place. Having this conversation tonight is one more way to be clear that Swain is for everyone, that we love each of our students and our faculty and our staff, and we care about each of our families. So this evening is dedicated to giving that message in particular to the LGBTQ members of our community. I also believe strongly in the importance of having this kind of conversation and of being open to hearing from others. I'm a white, straight man from an upper class family, and I can say honestly that I have not always realized how easily and comfortably I can move through the world. Day to day, I can confront very few barriers. I hear few statements that make me question my safety or identity. And I'm not challenged simply because of who I am or how I look to someone else. I need to hear how others experience the world in order to be the best educator and person I can be. All of us need to know how all members of our community experience this school that we love so much. So I thank you all for joining this conversation, for helping us continue to become an even more welcoming community and an inclusive school. One of the themes of the Institute we just attended was how important it is that our schools are places of justice, belonging, and love. And justice, you got the first one just with your name, and you talked a whole lot about belonging and love. So you got it all. That sense of justice, belonging, love, that sums up the why question for me. Let's make sure Swain is that place for everyone here, everyone who's part of our community. So with that said, I'll turn it back over to you, Veronica, although if you can't see the questions, maybe I'm gonna have to help with that, huh?
Well, thank you, Armistead. I just always so appreciate your leadership and being so open to having these conversations.
Sure.
So at this time, we are going to open up the floor for questions. If you would like to submit your question anonymously, you are able to do that using the Q&A feature. I am able to see the chat, but for some reason, Zoom will not let me click on Q&A. So Armistead, I'll ask you the question from the chat, and then if you could just kind of help direct some of those questions over to Justice then. We did have a question about, is there anything that you could have had at your school that would have made you feel more supported in your journey? So books, talks, anything you could think of. This is coming from a teacher, so I'm sure she's wondering, Justice, you know, what's something that she can offer to her students so that they can tangibly and visibly see that, you know, they have resources and that they are welcome.
Awesome. Okay, I'm sorry for the background noise if you hear it, but great question. Because I really can't think about things that happened in school that supported the community. I'm sure there were, but it wasn't blasted. And I graduated high school in 2012, and we just know that it's light years from where, you know, the change has happened, right? If you think about what happened in 2015, making it illegal for same-sex couples to get married. I mean, 2012 was 3 years before that. So I think just kind of making sure that you include in the curriculum some type of history with LGBTQ plus members there throughout history, et cetera, of doing things. So including that in the curriculum, celebrating it. Pride Month is typically in summer, so that is difficult, but look at different days. There's like Transgender Visibility Day, Remembrance Day, et cetera, to incorporate that in curriculum or events around that. But also after reaffirming allies and teaching about allyship even would be a great help for the community. So those are just a few ideas of things that I think schools could benefit from. And I know that I didn't get enough of that in school. So I hope that helps with that question. And also just like, I know there's support groups. I know schools usually have different groups like that focused on, I know there's like different unions within the school spaces. And so making sure that that group for the LGBTQ plus students, that gets supported as well, because it is one of those taboo things that don't really gets talked about as much as other groups. So I would definitely say making sure those voices are elevated more.
Thank you. And
I'm hearing you talk about representation in the curriculum, and that also makes me think about the books we have both in our library, in our classroom, and as part of our curriculum. Our librarian is here with us tonight, and I know she's very conscious of that. I'm just curious, when you were coming up through school, did you feel in books that were present in your classrooms, in your library, you saw representation of yourself?
Absolutely not, in both fronts, in both identities, both the black woman side of me, more specifically, and then the queer side of me as well. So, and this, again, we have a lot of work to do, especially in the space, and this is the time to do it. It's impressionable for our kids, our students, our youth, and this is where we get our experiences. So representation matters, and I did not have that. I went to, just to paint the picture, I went to a lot of suburban schools too. So predominantly white spaces, right? Predominantly Christian spaces. And so representation was definitely a small part of that. And so outside of Black History Month, right? And so I think there's definitely ways that we can incorporate it more. I know there's different school districts that I've heard that has had secondary teams and committees kind of look over curriculum and kind of help with the representation piece. And I think that definitely can be amplified and duplicated across the country.
Thanks for that.
This is a little bit of a weird example, but Justice, I'm sure you can relate. Everyone always talks about their beach reads, their summer beach reads. You know, sometimes you like to sit on the beach and read a great romance novel, just like an easy read. And I was at a local bookshop recently, where I thought I would love to read a romance novel about two women, or, you know, two women who are married, something that I could actually relate to. And I couldn't find any. And I finally went up to the front desk and said, do you have, you know, an LGBTQ section? And they were like, oh yeah. And they pointed me to this little table that had like 4 books on it, and it was all self-help books. And I was like, well, I don't really need the help right now. At least I don't think so. But I just wanted an easy.
Yeah. Can I add on that? Because you just brought up a good point. And what we do get exposed to, right? It's the sexualization of the community. So it's either, hey, you're super depressed, here's some resources, or you're super sexualized. Even if I think of like TV, as a kid, what I did see is just like every scene was just overly sexualized. And what does that create, right? For if you're a young kid looking at this, that type of representation, when you do get it, what kind it is. So I think that's also important to take a step further when we think about representation. That is, not every representation is good representation, right? And how do we create this culture where the community is not over sexualized? But then it's also not talking about suffering. Why can't we talk about celebration in a healthy way? And that's the point. That's where we need to get to, because we think, okay, representation, right? And I gotta use from a race lens. Okay, put more Black TV shows. But what are we talking about? We're talking about our suffering, all the trials we went through every time. What about the triumph? And I think the same can be said about the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah. Armistead, are you able to see any of those questions for me?
I am. Justice is just making me think of so many things, but my head is so I'll go back to the questions. So Justice, here's one question that came up while you were talking. It said, hi, can you touch base on pansexuals? My daughter is pansexual and wants to know how she can help her teachers and friends understand. I'll speak for myself and say it might help if somebody started with a definition of the word pansexual. If anyone feels they can do that, Justice, because I don't think I can. Justice,
you're muted.
I'm on mute. So I just wanted to give the actual definition of pansexuality. Is basically not limited in sexual choice with regard to biological sex, gender, or gender identity. So they basically are attracted towards people regardless of their sex. So it's like basically you're attracted to people regardless of their sex. That doesn't really matter to you. You're basically fluid. So that's a way of saying that. And I think, again, I always say this when I do my D&I talks, do not rely on the community to be able to teach and educate others. Because again, we're already dealing with the pressure of coming into ourselves, understanding that, and dealing with our process, and that's already tiring enough. But I would say help if they do want to be an advocate and help others understand, or you even, I think the more research that is done, the better. I know there's so many documentaries. If you just type in pansexual learnings, you can in Google. There's a lot of things that take to come up. And I do want to say that it's not on us to get people to understand. I think it's on us to walk in our authenticity and truth and lead by example type of thing. And so some people will never understand it or get it, and that pressure should not be laid upon someone. I know for myself, I had to manage my expectations that I cannot prove my identity to a lot of people. I have to prove my identity to myself, stay true to that, and then they can learn as I go through my process. So I encourage you to do not put that pressure on yourself or your child. And if you want your family members or your community to learn more, I think that pointing them in the direction of resources and learnings is a great route to take.
Yeah.
Hope that helps.
So what I'm hearing that is that as teachers and as parents, we need to take that on ourselves, not
allies. Yes.
Right. And
allies.
And I guess depending upon the age of the child, I would I would look to the parent to come to the school and say, I need you to understand this about my child. And if
100%.
you don't understand it, if you don't, so I just sort of smiled when I said I didn't know the definition of pansexual, but actually that smile is hiding a little bit of, embarrassment, right? I shouldn't have had to ask for that definition.
Yeah,
right?
well, here's the thing: we're all learning, and there's a lot of definitions to learn. And this is why. But the thing is, you ask. You don't assume. You know what I mean? You ask, and I think that makes a difference. And this is why discussions like these are so powerful, right? Because we're on this journey together. So I appreciate that, even that question.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just actually ironically watched a documentary last night, and it was about a support group of people with using different pronouns, and there was they had a chart that was hanging at their support group and different stickers of all of the different ways that people identify right now, not just pronouns, but also different sexualities, because there are so many. And it might be, not a bad idea, just food for thought, to have something like that somewhere in the school where it's 100%. Just a visual representation of, here are all the different things that are accepted here. And, how
that would be amazing. Amazing. Yeah. And true, it's okay not to be the expert. I represent the Q part, LGBTQ plus queer, and I try to learn, and it's hard to speak for everyone's experience when it comes to sexuality. It's such a personal process too, but the more resources we have out there, to your point, even within our school spaces, the better.
So there are a few more questions in the Q&A. So here's the next one. Can you give any tips on how my daughter can come out to other family members?
It's a great question. I would say, I guess if I were to have a question of clarity, it would be, what family members? Is it immediate or is it extended? So I'll use my example. There was no big coming out story for me. It was kind of like popped up online with a girlfriend one day, and you kind of maybe question it by the way I was dressing, or maybe not. But I did make it a point to tell my parents, my grandmother, who also helped raise me, kind of one-on-one. That process was definitely hard for me enough. And so I personally wouldn't recommend a huge coming out, moment or experience for that extended group. But I think the more intimate is better. And so I would say, as far as pointers, think of it less of coming out and more of walking in your truth, and owning your identity. Because I like to use that, because coming out just sounds like a very daring thing to do. And I know we use that a lot in the community. I heard this one time. It's let's not say come out, but inviting in. Because the whole idea of coming out is, I want to be accepted. I want to be affirmed. And so my biggest piece of advice in those moments is, how can you set the tone for your immediate family and kind of just walk in your truth and start with that, and then worry about the extended family members there. And with the immediate family, I would just recommend just being honest and be prepared for any type of reaction. And that's when operating in grace and operating in compassion matters. But you want to make sure your child has that that safety, that mental safety and capacity to do so, because it's a hard process. So I recommend making sure that your child is ready for it mentally, and that they feel your support. And the other two is kind of secondary and priority.
I would argue that once you have that support from your mom, if you feel fully supported by that one first person, whether it be a parent or I think specifically a parent, it's a lot easier to go from there.
Yep, exactly. Definitely a lot easier. Great question. It's tough. It's a tough one because it's easier said than done. And that's something that I do realize, because I didn't do it until I was like 20, 21. So it's definitely a process.
I just got to take note that a Westchester, Pennsylvania native just announced on Instagram that he was gay. And that reason that made news was because he's a professional football player for the Las Vegas Raiders. So it was a 1-minute post, and he started out by saying, "What's up, people? Just want to take a quick moment to say that I'm gay." Yeah. And his point was, I'm not looking to draw attention to myself, but I realize that I'm in the public eye as a professional athlete, and I want to make sure, other kids out there who are gay see me as a role model, right? And it came across like that. It wasn't like a big showy thing. It was just, hey, this is a fact of who I am. I want you to know it. And he looked smiling and comfortable. He'd obviously had the conversation with, he thanked people in his family and so forth. But
yeah, for sure. For sure.
It's a great little 1-minute clip. So here's another question for you. My child has been looking things up on the internet and sometimes finds things upsetting. Then they turn to me to explain hurtful terminology or what happened with AIDS in the 80s and 90s, etc. Are there age-appropriate resources you can recommend for LGBTQIA youth, or where could I find them?
Great question. I do want to be honest and say I do not know resources for specifically targeted to younger audiences off the top of my head, but I will follow up with Veronica, and maybe Veronica and I could do some type of homework to find those, because it is and I got this question a lot, especially in the last year. We dealt with a lot as a country, from a race perspective and a sexual identity perspective or orientation perspective, and so a lot of conversations, kids were asking a lot of hard questions to adults, but there are resources out there. Thanks for asking that question. I'll make sure to follow up with resources, but I will say a lot of times social media, the internet can be very upsetting when you hear stories, when you hear those tragic incidents that happen and impact the community. And so I would just say, if you could help with the healthy engagement, and I'm just saying, hey, let's kind of reinforce that this is a world that it's yin and yang, right? But also let's take a step back, and how do we kind of decompress and digest this information in a healthy way? Because as a kid, it can leave an impression that can be very damaging, as far as, okay, I can see my friend there. Because if your child's an ally, I can see my friend and I'm scared of what can happen to my friend, or I'm scared of what happened to myself, and we don't want that type of fear inflicted. So I would just say, make sure it's a healthy balance on what they're saying, and reaffirm that, hey, you feel love and supported, and you're protected, etc. But to answer the question, though, we'll follow up with the resources.
Well, I did actually, on our Facebook, on Swain's Facebook group, there was a Pride Month event that you could still find, that I listed a ton of resources for different things and different ways that families and their children can celebrate Pride Month. And then we also have a highlight on our Instagram. It just says Pride. And if you just click through it, there's a lot of different books and resources there too. So if any of you are interested and can't find it, just reach out to me specifically and I'll send it your way.
I just seen a comment from Karen who talked about Bradbury Sullivan Center, and I've actually done some poetry readings at that center. So there's definitely a lot of youth centers and communities. I know the bigger city, the better opportunity for a center dedicated for LGBTQ plus youth. I know my stepbrother goes to one in Texas, and so that's a great resource. And I kind of affirm that comment, Karen. Thanks for saying that.
I just also want to bring everyone's attention in the chat to Ingrid, when you all were talking, Veronica, when you were talking about stories that you could take to the beach. She's talking about her daughter is listening to one on Spotify about two men, and their Spotify has a kid-friendly story time, and they have a story named The Two Princes for about age groups 8 and up. So I know there are a lot of resources like that, and we'll make sure that we have, as a school, have the goal of providing resources for our families.
Awesome, thank you.
Everybody can both have support, but also knowledge and education, right? And also, just when I hear you talk about a book like that, Veronica, or when you were talking about the books you didn't have when you were in school, Justice, it seems to me so much of that about is stories that are just regular stories, whose characters happen to be LGBTQ characters, right? Because people are people, and people live their lives, whoever they are, however they identify, and that's what and stories are really powerful in just transmitting that. That's who people are, right? So we certainly have some of those in our library. I know we'll keep looking at building up that resource.
Are there any other questions, Armistead?
That's everything from the Q&A. We've covered all of them.
All right. Well, I would just like to thank both Justice and Armistead for everything that you've shared and also for all of the amazing questions. Even though the program is ending tonight, we know that the work has just begun, and thank you for helping to create our Let's Talk series become a reality. As always, we are also proud to be a part of the Swain community. We will continue to enact change through this kind of dialogue, learning, and everyday action within our teaching. So this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel and our website, and feel free to follow us on social media for more resources as time goes on.
And this room, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Justice, really good to have you here. I'm looking forward to seeing the movie you're making, the documentary, recording,
campaign.
whatever.
It's a campaign. You'll see it. Yeah, a commercial. A commercial.
Let
Awesome.
us know. Let us know when it comes out.
I will. I will share it for sure. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Justice. Thank you,
Thank you.
Armistead.
All right.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.